Ukrainians recently did a massively successful counteroffensive in the area near to Bakhmut, and this is also proves that such attacks are possible even in this stage of war. In addition to that, there are several reports that Russians are running out of troops to storm Vuhledar, Bakhmut and some other cities in the east of Ukraine. Just incredible news, right? But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. DJ Sound Freaky, how you doing, brother? And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first picture comes to us from the northern parts of Russia, where allegedly, the very first time since the end of the Cold War, Russia released its nuclear-carrying submarines into the ocean. Whether this is just a training, a show of power, or a regular escalation, I guess we will know soon enough. Next we have a picture from a German port, Bremerhaven, where American Bradleys are being slowly dispatched from the ship. In addition to that, 280 more other pieces of equipment have been delivered along with Bradleys, and their next stop is supposed to be in Poland before they arrive to Ukraine. And speaking about the military support to Ukraine, recently there has been a meeting between ministers of defense of different NATO countries, which happened in Brussels, Belgium. One of the main pledges of this meeting is that America promised that its country and its allies will help Ukraine as much as possible to launch their own counteroffensive and make it successful. In addition to that, the Western countries they pledged to synchronize the deliveries of military vehicles to Ukraine, and in the meantime, Ukrainian soldiers will be trained how to use them. Several countries pledged their own Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, including America, Canada, Poland, Germany, and Norway. In addition to that, also pledged 4 of its special tanks. And it is expected that the very first big batch of Leopard 2 tanks will arrive to Poland somewhere in March, which is already next month. Besides that, America mentioned that it is not against Poland sending their F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. But at the same time, America is not yet ready to send their own planes, but they're strongly considering this option. And to make things even more intriguing, right here we have a video of Minister of Defense of Ukraine Oleksiy Reznikov, who is showing his handkerchief with the Su-27 plane picture. And whenever he is asked who is going to supply these planes to you, Oleksiy Reznikov said, it will be the sky, which kinda basically implies that obviously right now he does not want to reveal the names of these countries, but these deliveries are most likely set to happen. And to sum it all up, according to the chairman of the Joint Staffs of American Forces, Mark Milley, Russia has already lost strategically, operationally, and tactically. What he basically meant by that is that Vladimir Putin, he thought that Ukraine will be just an easy target, probably because his generals lied to him out of fear towards him. And now Ukraine, with its bravery and self-sacrifice, it has proven the world, and especially NATO countries, that it is very well possible to defeat such an enemy as the Russian army. And because of this, NATO right now is as strong and united as never before. And pretty much yes, everyone was afraid of this massive offensive by Russia. But since we see that pretty much they're not advancing, they're running out of troops, and Ukraine is even counterattacking, and it is still February. Just imagine what will happen in March, when Ukraine will start receiving all these Western military vehicles and equipment. Because of this, I personally think that the next 2 to 4 weeks will be extremely crucial and pivotal in this war. And if you don't want to miss any events that will happen during this time frame, just please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video. You can also follow me on Instagram if you want to see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, and now let's quickly talk about the situation in the east and this most recent massive successful offensive of Ukrainians near Bakhmut area. But first of all, as you can see from this video, which came to us from Kursk region, Russians increased the density of their tent city closer to Ukrainian borders. And then right here are the satellite images from Voronezh region, also located in Russia, closer to Ukrainian borders, which shows how much bigger the Russian military base became recently. As we move to Ukraine itself, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continue their offensive along Svatove-Kreminna road, but for the last couple of days, Ukrainians were successfully repelling the majority of these attacks. And then we have a report that a Russian Su-24 plane has been intercepted near Bakhmut. And what makes this specific plane so interesting is that it is the very same plane where Yevgeny Prigozhin has invited President Zelensky to a duel over Bakhmut. What he basically said in that video is that if Zelensky wins in aerial duel, Bakhmut will be Ukrainian, but if Prigozhin wins, Russians will advance closer to Dnipro. Well, this plane is intercepted, so I think it's time to keep your promises, Senior Prigozhin. But in all seriousness, the heavy fighting around Bakhmut and its area still continues, and reportedly Ukrainians started seizing the advantage in artillery duels dominance. It has even been reported that Ukrainians were incredibly successful and were able to launch their own counteroffensive to the south of Ivanovsky, and as you can see from this map, they were able to take a big chunk of land back and push Russians further away from this highway, which leads directly inside Bakhmut. And the significance of this particular event is that Russians were allegedly supposed to use this highway to enter Bakhmut from the west and surround the remaining Ukrainian forces, but now since Ukrainians are effectively repelling them to the south of this highway, the probability of this happening became dramatically lower. Which means that as for now, Russians will only be able to conduct frontal offensive against Bakhmut, which as we already know is being successfully repelled by Ukrainians almost every single day. And to be honest, I recently received several videos of street fights inside Bakhmut and its surrounding areas, and if you want to see these videos in addition to hundreds of other uncensored footage, please consider checking my Patreon. You can still use 1 week of free access, and all the links will be down below. Alright, and as we go back to the east of Ukraine, some regroupings of Russian forces has been spotted to the south of Vuhledar, and at the same time, the artillery duels increased recently. And at the same time, Ukrainians were also able to destroy a Russian heavy flamethrower called Solntsepek. And before we talk about Russians running out of troops to storm Ukrainian eastern cities, let's briefly take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as you can see right here, Russians were able to advance a little bit to the northwest of Polohi. Going to Solidar area, we can see that Russians got a little bit closer to Rozdolivka and Vesele. And then going a little bit to the south, we can see that Russians advanced to the west of Novobakhmutivka and expanded the contested territory to the west of Novoselivska Druha. But pretty much yes, another major factor recently in this pivotal moment of this war is that Russians reportedly were only performing low-level assaults against Vuhledar, which basically means that the intensity was not as strong as before and the number of people was way fewer. And it only suggests us one idea, that Russians slowly but surely are running out of troops to storm several Ukrainian cities, such as Vuhledar and Bakhmut. Another indirect confirmation of this came to us by the representative of Ukrainian army, Vladimir Nazarenko, and he said that Ukrainians already constructed multi-layered defenses around Bakhmut. He says that every single street is heavily guarded, every single building is a fortress, and in case Ukrainians are pushed away from their locations, nearby there'll be another properly maintained line of defense. He does acknowledge that Russians they continue their offensive against this city, but just generally speaking, defending is always a little bit easier. All Ukrainians have to do is sit tight and wait for the attack by Russians, which to be honest they are gladly doing by sending waves after waves of Russian soldiers. Even Yevgeny Prigozhin himself, he claimed that in the near future Russia will not be able to capture Bakhmut. He says that every day from every direction, at least 300 to 500 Ukrainians arrive to Bakhmut, they defend the city and they increase their artillery attacks. And because of this, and because we also know how much Russia already wants to capture Bakhmut for at least this symbolic victory to present to its people, most likely they'll just continue sending troops to their pretty much unknown destiny. And I mean, the number of soldiers is rapidly decreasing. If you remember from my previous episode, Russia for the last several days have been losing 824 people on average every single day, and the majority of this number came to us from combined Bakhmut and Vuhledar, which simply means sooner or later, in case Russia continues with their 100-year-old military tactics, they will simply run out of troops to storm Bakhmut as well. And it's not just Bakhmut. Like mentioned previously, pretty much the same thing is happening in Vuhledar, in addition to that in some other smaller cities in the east. And I mean, sooner or later the Russian soldiers, they will see it for themselves, that their commanders are sending them to do the tasks which are completely meaningless, just so that some propaganda can claim that we took Bakhmut. And because of this, the morale of the Russian soldiers will inevitably start to decrease, which plays a huge factor in successful attacks of an army as a whole. And you guessed it right, as soon as Ukraine starts receiving all these Western weapons, this is when Ukraine will start its own successful counteroffensive across the entire front line in its own country. And just once again, if you don't want to miss any of this as soon as it starts happening, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes literally one click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where there's still 1 week of free access. You can find all the obvious links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.